What we have here is my tool path for my big jack, which is my biggest boot jack. We have an order for customization of the initials TG. So we're going to be adding those to it. We're going to add some lettering. We want to put in, I usually do Baskerville and go TG. Then I hit that, I input it in, I move it, I rotate it to 270. And then I use the top and bottom here, which is right in the middle, to center it, because I know that this circle here is centered, and I make it as big as I'd like to make it, something like that. I recenter, something like that. Then I'll know that whenever, as it's placed here, this T and G will be cut out or carved, and it won't hit the edges, and it's just big enough to fill it, but not get outside the limits. So I'll make it a little bit smaller than just the where it needs to go. Move it over a tad where it looks good. And then I work on the actual cut. I don't need it to go with, because I'm filling it with epoxy. I don't need it to go very deep. So I'll go about 1/8 of an inch, clear out pocket, and it's ready. So now what I do is I take and I delete the tool paths that I don't want, because I know it's in position now. Remove, 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 remove. We'll go ahead and just highlight this one, click remove, then I'll take and stretch it back out to where it was. So now we have just making the toolpath for the TG. I'm going to use a 60-degree. Some right here. And simulate it, and it carves it, showing over here, but it does carve. It will actually be in this area right here when it's done. So it's good. Now hit project, download G code, it downloads it. And then what I do from here is I will back all this back up until the TG is gone. And that's it. I use this as a template to know where my TG is going to go, my initials are going to go, or whatever I'm going to put in there. And then I put it in there, delete it all, run the toolpath. Okay, now that the toolpath's ready, we will start making the boot jack. I'll cut my blank here and take it over here and sand it. I've sped all this up so you don't have to watch it all, because it's just common, simple woodworking. I sand it down roughly to get all the major chunks out of this pine, and then I come back over it with like a 220 and get it fairly smooth. I start off with the one that's the color that was ordered is like a sort of a aged oak. I start off with just a regular oak. I don't always do this. If it's a yellow pine, then I'll just go straight to an actual walnut finish. But with this one, I put a layer of just golden oak over the top of it. Let it dry for a little bit, or let it soak in for just a little bit, then clean it off. Then I'll come back in there and I will use this walnut so it doesn't sink in, doesn't soak up in there as much, since I've already put the golden oak over it, and it gives me the finish I like, because I didn't like anything sort of in between those two. I use a gel on the walnut and let it sit for a couple minutes and then wipe it back off. When it's done here, you'll see that one side is the good side, one side's the rough cut side, or it's a little bit rougher. I picked the best side. I marked the center for the CNC machine, and that back side's pretty much cut off, in the rougher cut spots. I put the blank on the CNC. I've just got a Bob CNC. It's a low end CNC, but it does exactly what I need it to do. And I've never had a issue with it. I know there's a lot better machines out there, but this was the machine that I chose for the budget I had, and so far I am extremely pleased with it. I know I don't use a CNC like a lot of people use a CNC. I have you could, for this job here, you could use just a router and route it out yourself. Just draw it on there and route it out. So I get the CNC set. I am fixing to carve the TG first, and it takes off here. As you can see, I got it sped way up. It doesn't, or I don't run it this fast. I know a lot of people do run them faster, but I don't run it this fast. But this is the TG that it's cutting out. This is why I did the tool path, because I know where it's placing this TG is inside the lines where I'm fixing to cut out the boot jack. I can use a bandsaw to cut out this boot jack, but I use a CNC because it's perfect every time. Changing out the bit, changing out the tool path, now it will take off and start cutting out the actual boot jack part, because the lettering's already ready. The first little circles here that it does is my plugs. Instead of using dowel rods, I just let it cut out a couple plugs, because it sort of matches the grain when I put it in there, and then it takes off and cuts out the boot jack itself. Sorry for the coughing. But it boogies along and cuts it out. When I get done with cutting it out, I will take and clean it up a little bit. I think I'm using a upcut bit here. Most of the time I use a down cut, but it was what I had sitting there. Doesn't matter on this project because I always round over the edges and clean it up. Just the style of boot jack that I make. This boot jack here is the biggest boot jack I make. It'll fit, size 10, 11 boots, all sorts of boots, rubber boots, cowboy boots, all kinds of boots, but it won't fit, women's or children's or anything like that. So a lot of boot jacks won't grab a hold of rubber boots and work boots from guys, and so I made this bigger boot jack that will. So here I am, round over in the edges. I just put a real slight round over on it, and that gets it cleans it up a lot. When I flip it over here, as you see it cleans it up and gets all the edges off of it that the CNC might leave, and the tabs and everything else. And I'll take it from the router table over to the spindle sander, and I will knock down the rough edges of the corners and smooth out the inside of the cut. I think that's like a 300 grit, maybe 220 grit or something like that. Just whatever I've got that's better, that's finer than 100 grit, what I'll throw in there, because I'll come back in an orbital sander. I'll round off the edges some more and get them nice and smooth with a 220 grit, and that just makes it for a little nicer finish when it's done. Use a sponge sander to get the inside where I can't use the orbital sander, and it just finishes off what the spindle sander might have not got, since it's a little bit softer edge sanding block. Clean out the grooves of the TG, make sure there's nothing left over, and it's ready to go. Now those are the pegs that I cut out, the plugs I cut out. I stick those in there so I don't lose them. I mix my epoxy. Some people just paint it, some people leave it the way it is, some people do whatever they want to do on their signs or whatever they're filling, but I use epoxy. I just think it's a little bit higher end. It does slow my process down because you have to wait 12 hours or so for that little bit of epoxy to cure. But here I am slopping it everywhere, and I'll get my syringe, I'll fill it up, I'll add a little needle tip to it so I can squirt it in there. If it's an intricate detailed lettering or logo or something that I'm putting in, I will use a mask, so whenever it gets over the top, like I just spilled some on the outside of the G, when it gets over the top, I can take and clean it up with the mask. The mask will protect the layers. Here I'm making the upright part of the boot jack. It's really simple deal with 3 beveled edges and 1 flat. I'll show you how it works here in a minute. I'll cut that one, then I'll come back. I got a mark on my miter saw there that I line up, put it back at 0 and cut it off. Then I'll put it back at my set degree and make the other two cuts. There's one, I got a little marks over here on the left hand side over here that for whatever size boot jack I'm using, I marked the spot I need to cut, the length, flip it around, and put the angle on this side. And so that's what it looks like. Whenever I'm done, I'll bring it over here, round over the edge on both ends. Then I'll come to the sander, the belt sander, and I will sand it down and round over the other edges, all except for the flat part that goes against the boot jack, just to make it not as clunky and square it off. Just gives it a little bit more, detailed look. Just my way of building mine. I'll take it over to the orbital sander and finish it off, get it smoothed out. You see that all the edges are still sort of squared off, so I was taking round them off some, where if it's on a hardwood floor or something, it doesn't have sharp edges. On this, the bottom, this is the bottom that I'm rounding off here. I'll round it off some and just make it good and smooth. I leave the top where my hand is flat because that's what goes up against the boot jack. Okay, the boot jack is dry, the epoxy is dry. I put my plugs out. I will take and start the assembly. To the right, you see the base that I just grabbed. I've got a little jig that I use to know where to insert. I'll drill a pilot hole in each of these cutouts. So that CNC machine cuts out the perfect circle for me, perfect depth, instead of trying to use a drill. I put these pilot holes in. I'll add some wood glue. After I start the screws and start the assembly. The assembly doesn't take long at all. It used to, till I made hundreds of these. I go pretty fast. The monogrammed ones like this, the customized ones, I do make individually, but the ones I sell to all my or the Etsy buyers that just don't want one monogram, Amazon handmade, and then my local boot western wear places, I make them in bulk in 3 different colors. And so I line it up, get the hose set, put the pressure back down on it, drill it together. That seals it or pulls it tight, gets the glue tight, have a little squeeze out. And these are the pegs, the plugs that we cut out. And so that one flew out whenever I was cutting, so I had to clean it up a little bit. And this one is ready. So I put them in there because I'm fixing to I go over there to the belt sander and I sand them off, where I just drop them right down in there after I stick the glue. That way I don't have to sand those down. So I pretty much just grind them down with the sander and to the right length. So I put my line on there and they just set down in there. I stick it down in there and I couldn't get it back out. So I have to work it back out. And I probably could have flipped it over, but I didn't want to have to do all that for the camera. And normally I don't even test it. It's usually right every time. And so there's the other one. Now I have to get that one back out, but I just want to show y'all me doing it. I put the glue in and Then I take and shove the plugs back in, and I will line up the grain so it semi matches, and then take the other one, shove it down in there, wipe off the excess glue, and I don't even wait. You know, as soon as I get that done, I know it's glued in, I know it's got a good seal because all the squeeze out. I'll just make sure and get all the glue off, then I'll take it over and start to finish the staining process. As you see, the TG's good and dry. If it was a light color, I wouldn't stain over the top of it like I'm going to, but since it's black, I don't have to worry about anything. I took the sanding block and I'm not sanding the plug down, I'm just sanding that glue off there so it will know that I had that squeeze out. I wanted to make sure that whenever I stain, that glue's not preventing the stain from getting to the wood. So I'll take that dark walnut gel and I will take and do the sanding process, the staining process again. I go over the whole thing again, edges, the part that's not stained, and the stained part I like, because I've never seen any, the edge grain is going to be darker somewhat anyway, and so I might as well go over the whole thing again. And I just know my little mixture, like I use my golden oak and then I use this one on this one, and then I'll use a espresso for the darkest boot jacks that we make, and then of course the golden oak. Then we sell a lot of just regular natural that I'll just put a polyacrylic over it and make a real nice finish. We also have a blue one that we sell, and every once in a while we'll get a custom color asked for, which we don't mind doing. So it's all stained up, and we'll be knocking it off here shortly. As you see, it didn't really make after the second coat of that on there, it really didn't make the top any darker than what it was. I don't wait like a lot of people do. I know on this gel stain it says to wait 5 minutes. I'll wait 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll get after it and clean it off. I don't really see a difference, and it's I just in the effort to make as many things in the shop as I can in a day, I will shorten some dry times and stuff like that. Whenever I get done with this, cleaning this off, I will take it straight over and start putting the poly on it. And I use polyacrylic is what I use. And people say you got to wait 12, 14, 18, 24 hours before you can put it on there. That is not true. I've sold hundreds of boot jacks and have gone straight from wiping it off like I'm doing right now to putting on the polyacrylic or the polyurethane. And so, Minwax makes stains with the polyacrylic already mixed in it. And so you can't tell me that you have to wait, because you don't. And like I say, I've sold hundreds of these, and I've had one return, and that's just because they ordered the wrong size. Alright, here's the polyacrylic. You're taking add a very liberal coat. I'm not going to show all the steps, or all the coats, because it's just the same thing over and over again. But I do put, depending on which color and which finish I put on these, I'll put anywhere from 3 minimum to 5 coats of polyacrylic, which gives them you know, almost an epoxy, you know, thick coating. And I will use polyurethane on some of them. On one of mine that I like a deep rich color, but I'll put the coat on, then I'll sand it, and a light sanding, and knock off any, you know, burrs, sand dust, or sawdust, and get after it again with another coat. As you see, that's when you look at the bottom there is a, you know, it's not completely dry. You can see it right there in the little crease. It's not completely dry. I only wait, you know, 5-10 minutes before I go to the next coat, because it just piles on, seals together, and it's perfect. I'll smooth it out with my glove, you know, to give it a nice finish out on the. I'll take out a lot of the excess that gets down in grooves, because I don't make my epoxy all the way through. But that's it. We're done with this. I won't show the rest of them, but we take and get it finalized. I'll hang it up, let it dry. I'll package it up in no time, like an hour, and get it ready to ship off. And that's it. Hope y'all enjoyed the video.